All right, Rabosai, good morning. Let us begin. Chevron on Zoom, you hear me okay? Excellent, excellent, wonderful. All right, Rabosai, let's begin. So we're picking up today in Os Chaf Zayin, in Tzidkas Hatzaddik. So again, the Rebbe is gonna, the truth is in Os Chaf Vav, which we only did a little bit of the beginning, continued on the same theme of the Mishmoros, but I figured now is a good opportunity to start a little bit of a new topic as well. So the Rebbe writes in Sif Chav Zayin, Tzorich b'tchilas hayom v'chin b'tchilas halayla lehispalel al hagolos. It's a very incredible and beautiful idea that a person should daven at the beginning of the day as well as at the beginning of the night regarding Golos, or more specifically, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring an end to Galus. If you take a look in the Uriah Chasidus on the bottom, so where it says Chav Zayin, La'el Os Yotes Huv'u Divrei HaGimara, Shal Kol Mishmar U'Mishmar Shoy HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So let's remember again, in the last couple of Seifim, we were focusing on this idea that at every Mishmar, the Ribbon Shalom cries out, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Shoy, he cries out, and he says, Oy labanim, woe to the children who have been exiled because of their sins, and woe to the father who has been forced to exile his children. So the Gemara explains that HaKadosh Baruch Hu perpetually cries out regarding the Galus. And it is our job, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu cries out, for us to cry out as well. So he quotes the Rash, V'divrei harash al zeh, shelachin ra'ui l'chol yirei shamayim, she'yehei meitzar v'doig ba'os ha'shah, al churban habayis v'galos hashchina. Therefore, again, for every person who has Yirah Shamayim, if I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is crying out, if I know that the Ribbon Shel Olam is in pain over the Galus, so I have an obligation to empathize, to feel empathy, to ultimately cry out with the Ribbon Shel Olam as well. Va'atu yivar, she'inyan atfila ala Galus, sarach lios betchilas hayom, dahanu b'shah shemischalef milayla liyom, v'chein betchilas alayla, so it's actually very interesting. So what Hatzaddik is pointing out over here is, so when is it, step one is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu cries out over the fact that we are in exile, and over the fact that he had to exile us. He cries out over that a number of times a day. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in pain, we have an obligation to be in pain as well. It's a sense of empathy. I empathize with the Ribbon Shalom. I feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu's pain. But what Tzaddik is introducing over here is an incredible yesod as to when am I supposed to mourn over the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and over Galus. And he says, really it's supposed to happen in the beginning of the day. And the beginning of the day means at the time that the night ends and the day begins, as well as at the beginning of the night, when the day ends and the night begins. Why is that? Shebizmanim halalu roi la'adam lehispalal az bifrat al arichos hagalos. So we'll say, this is really quite amazing. What Rab Tzaddik is so I have to dafka mourn for the galus, and we're going to discuss what mourning for exile means. But I have to mourn for what I have lost in the beginning of the night, when the day ends, the night begins, and beginning of the day, when the night ends and the day begins. What's the pshat? So Reb Tzaddik is saying something amazing over here. We'll say, if a person has ever experienced loss, so when does a person feel loss most acutely? In times of change. In times of change. Right? Meaning, if I have a regular routine and I go through my regular routine, so I might not consciously be aware of the loss as much. I mean, obviously when a person endures loss, in the immediate aftermath of loss, a person may feel that every moment of every single day. But as time goes on and you get into a rhythm, so you feel, when you're in your day-to-day zone, you're in your day-to-day rhythm, the loss may not be as acute. But when do you really feel the loss? When your regular schedule stops and there are changes, right? When Yom Tov comes, when Shabbos comes, when there's a shift in time, that's when that void in my heart is so much more acutely felt. So Tzaddik is saying something amazing. When do we feel the pain of the loss of the Beis HaMikdash? And when do we feel the tsar, the pain of the Shechina? When does that occur? When does that occur? At times of change. Right? So when I'm going through the day, I'm going in my rhythm, I'm okay. When day ends and night begins, there's a shift, I begin to feel the pain of the Shekhinah. Nighttime comes, fine, I still into my nighttime routine, but then when nighttime ends and daytime begins, that's when I begin to feel the pain of the Shekhinah. Both said this is going to be incredibly important because we're going to see this dynamic. We all know this because this what Reb Tzaddik is describing over here is perhaps one of the greatest dangers of life, which is we become unfeeling when we just settle into a rhythm. And then it generally takes something to jog me out of that slumber or that rhythm to feel. This is the inyan of Chodesh Elul, right? Think about this for just a moment. So what's the whole essence of Chodesh Elul? Why do we blow the shofar on Chodesh Elul? So the Torah writes, Uri yishenu mishinaschem, to wake us up. Why? Because again, I'm in a rhythm. I'm in a rhythm. And when I'm in my rhythm, so I don't think as much. I don't contemplate as much. I'm just in my rhythm. So therefore, says Reb Tzaddik, but when times of change come along, that's when you feel that things are a little bit out of sync. That's when you feel that something is lacking. So I mourn for the Chorban in the beginning of the night. I mourn for the Chorban in the beginning of the day. I blow shofar during Chodesh Elul because sometimes I just have to jog myself, to shake myself out of that rhythm in order to feel what is really lacking in my life. It's an incredibly profound yesod, because what Hatzaddik is discussing over here is, this is why so often in life we don't make the changes we want to make, and we don't become the people we really want to become, because it's like cruise control. You know, it's really just, you know, it's I'll give you a musr with, well, I'll talk about that a different time. So anyway, so the Hatzaddik goes on. He says, now in the brackets, he says something incredible over here in the Be'urei Chasidus. So I'm in the left-hand column, page Samech Gimel, second line down. So remember, we still have to discuss what exactly does it mean to mourn. My DirecTV subscription finally came through. So again, what exactly it means that I'm mourning for, we're going to have to discuss, and how this actually looks, we're going to discuss. But here in the Be'urei Chasidus, he adds in an incredible piece. So he says, "Utfila zu kolalas es hakol." This tefillah includes everything. What does that mean? Shabbos said, this is incredible. Shaharei Shibud Malchius Hamafriya LaAdam Bavodas Hashem Yisparach Mitzad Umos Ha'olam Usaor Shebeisa Shu HaYetzer Hara Shebalev. So say this is incredible. Says Reb Tzaddik, when we go ahead and we mourn for the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, so we'll say, if we're honest, many of us find these types of this concept very difficult. I understand that I have to mourn for the Beis HaMikdash, and I could do it. I could do it once a year. Tisha B'Av, I could devote a day to mourn, okay, maybe 3 weeks, you know, but the notion of mourning for the Beis HaMikdash every day, and again in this model, maybe even twice a day, it doesn't seem shaykh, right? You read the stories of the great Rebbes of yesteryear, you know, and not even just Rebbes, but great tzaddikim of yesteryear, who they would cry during Tikkun Chatzos, they would cry for the absolute Beis HaMikdash, and we marvel at people who are on such a lofty and high level, but the truth is, it appears to be very unrelatable. In other words, I can relate more to the person who learns, you know, a great number of hours a day, because I have a frame of reference for that. I can understand that. But someone who's crying over the Beis HaMikdash every single day, it's just hard to understand how would I tap into that energy. But Hatzaddik says it's because sometimes we don't understand what it is that we are mourning for. Says Hatzaddik, we often think that that mourning of the Beis HaMikdash just means the mourning of the Beis HaMikdash. He says no. Look what he writes. Go back to the brackets. He says when we mourn for the Beis HaMikdash, that means also we mourn because we are in exile. And what we mourn about being in exile is Shibud Malchius, subjugation by the nations of the world. We mourn the fact that we have been unable throughout the ages to live freely, to practice our religion freely, to live in a place which is supportive of all of our religious values and norms. That's Shibud Malchius. Hamafriya la'adam ba'avodas Hashem Yisbarach mitzat umos ha'olam. So when I mourn the Beis HaMikdash, they both say it's interesting. When I mourn the Beis HaMikdash, actually the last thing I'm mourning is a building. You know, we often this is why sometimes it's so difficult for us, because we assume that mourning the Beis Hamikdash means the absence of a building. That's not what we mourn. Of course, we're sad that there is not a Beis Hamikdash, and we pine and yearn every single day for the restoration of that physical structure. But that's not the essence of what it is that we mourn. What we mourn is exile. And what we mourn about exile is what the Rebbe calls Shibud Malchus, because Shibud Malchus represents an inability to fully spiritually actualize, an inability, because throughout the ages we had to live under difficult circumstances, to activate our spiritual potential. That's what we mourn. He goes on, and we mourn as a result of that Shibud Malchus, and as a result of the inability to fully spiritually actualize, as a result, ultimately, again, of diaspora, of oppression, of persecution. Therefore, what happens? The Sa'ar Shebe'isa, the yeast in the dough, takes over. What we mourn about say is that in the inability to fully spiritually actualize throughout the ages, because of the subjugation of the nations of the world, the Yetzer Hara has become stronger. And as a result of the Yetzer Hara becoming stronger, our ability to fully spiritually actualize becomes even more remote. That's what we mourn over the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So we'll have to stop over here for today, but we will pick up in Meretz Hashem with this concept tomorrow. But what I want to say, what's incredible about this Hatzaddik is it's going to totally revolutionize the way you look at the concept of mourning over the Beis Hamikdash. Because for many of us, it's just incredibly esoteric and doesn't really seem very shaykh. Reb Tzaddik says that's because we often don't understand what it is that we are truly mourning. So more on this topic in Meretz Hashem tomorrow. Shkoyach.